my intros are unreasonably sensational. And I think part of it is like I grew up on radios that would like introduce their show like this. I think about it like I have no idea how to, do this. Welcome to the Blank Canvas. If you're new to this is a project brought to you by Plinko Solutions, focused on bridging AI and accessibility, specifically in building business infrastructure and driving real revenue to the business. So today we'll be expanding on a few things. One is the funnel design stuff we spoke about recently, specifically around building an inbound lead gen kind of flow. So I'm gonna walk you guys through it. So this looks like a lot, but in a recent video I spoke about Markov chains and the law of large numbers. Long story short, each of these numbers kind of represent a probability that it's averages based on dependent variables, but essentially got an unqualified, solution unaware, problem unaware prospect. There is a 30% chance when they interact with you, they stay like that. There's a 10% chance they're more lost, depending on your actual, copy. And chances are if they're lost, 1-to-1 ratio, they kind of stay there. If you do a good job of actually engaging with them, there's a 60% chance they kind of move into some sort of longer engagement, listen to your other stuff, kind of continue on. And then there's a 20% chance from that they actually fall back onto the I don't really know about this territory. There's a 30% chance they stay in that one. This is interesting, but I don't really know, if I trust this guy. So considering you do your job well, 50% chance they move forward to the trust aspect of the funnel. 10% they kind of fall back. And then 20% they kind of stay within this sort of trust kind of building phase. Once they have your trust though, 70% chance move to actually being a problem aware, solution aware, qualified prospect, which would now be considered a lead because they've engaged with you and they're actually interested. 50% of those guys are actually ready, time-wise, budget-wise, to move forward to some sort of paid commitment. 20% of them kind of stay within that little bubble until it's the right time. And my favorite little ratio of this is 1-to-1 when you actually deliver for somebody, do a good job. There's a good chance they're willing to go through that whole process again, given that it's with you. So why is this all important? Why does this matter? A large part of being a good service provider is offer ideation and getting feedback loops and actually talking to the market that you're serving. I'm going to go on a small little tangent here. Kind of spoke about this when I dove into probability and kind of, how this kind of affects people. Like most things in life, there's a compound effect to it. And the reason why I kind of start with these probabilities is when we go into like funnel design and actually moving into large numbers and speaking to many and building an audience, there's a lot of narrative, which I've come to learn is really, egoic in a sense. So I bring the camera for this. If you orient your sense of self around the opinions of people who do not know you, you'll kind of be tossed into sort of if you're like an overthinker like myself, you'll try and like compose or kind of like put together as much as you can this sort of controlled way and almost image oriented, which is very self-aggrandizing. Even being anywhere less than authentic, it can play against it can hurt your development. Essentially, it can kind of curb your growth. So with that in mind, I also understand that surface area over time, all right, frequency of events, states being like an actual activity, something is happening. The more that happens at a frequent base, you get this sort of effect where once you cross a certain ratio, algorithms, whatever the powers that be, distribution will start to reward you. And that happens rather rapidly. However, it doesn't happen without design. So today, I'm going to be diving a bit into prompt chains and bit more practically how to use that with browser agents going forward. So with browser agents, I wanted to say one note, draw you a quick little, because the danger of a man in a whiteboard. Let me make one point clear. So I think I deleted this graphic that I made earlier. But anyways, say this is a language model, right? It's talking to another language model, AI in this instance, right? we often think there's some kind of black box effects happening here. And, the language models, they have their way of, the robots, they have their way of talking. What makes browser agents different than a search engine or LLM search mode, that kind of thing, is language models that are desktop facing have a bit of a reinforcement layer. So while they're answering the question, they're also going back and checking. And they're doing this process a few times before it actually ends up getting to you. Now, why this is kind of novel, it's embedded in the architecture, which is a fancy way of saying it's guaranteed to do this. Language models that don't fact check themselves, often if you're a no code automation specialist, the way that you kind of like move around that is just by having the language model evaluate itself, which we probably have done a number of times. When you kind of put two OpenAI modules next to each other and say, hey, you watch you, make sure you're doing this right. And you kind of have that reinforcement happen. Why are reinforcements important? Especially with browser agents, there's a lot of roadblocks, a lot of ambiguities, and the ability of a prompt chain is how well you can, with upward stream, kind of map out what needs to happen. So it's kind of following this deterministic structure. So with that in context, what am I doing here today? So I'm going to do a nice live kind of troubleshoot this. Mention funnel building. Make something very clear here. When you're designing a funnel and you're building trust, transparency is everything. Understanding the information economy and how things are kind of propelling. I'm less interested in monetizing an audience that doesn't know what it's paying for, right? Which often is a lot of communities, a lot of these kind of school communities specifically will do, buy my template, buy my, throw the big screen for dramatic effect. I'm not here to sell you something that you don't need. So with that in token, what I do intend to do is provide as much of an onboarding ramp. So I'm building a 30-day kind of roadmap that you can take and each of the systems kind of build on top of each other as an actual asset building thing. So what does that kind of look like? I'll show you. So first and foremost, there is a quiz that I'm building. Now, originally it says Lovable here. That's because I had a workshop telling me, that taught me a lot on Lovable. But reality is, I got a coupon for 1 year free of bolt.new Pro. So I'll be using that. It's the same kind of stuff. A little bit of a more technical token on it, but you can use Cursor, you can use whatever you're comfortable with, truly. But I'm going to be walking you guys through how I'm going to be designing and building a full kind of onboarding funnel. Basically taking you through in a Plinko kind of way. If you drop here, you have a likelihood to go there, and then probability-wise, it'll essentially lead you down wherever is the best product or service for you. And I got a few packages I'm really excited to share to kind of showcase that. A lot of them being some of the most accessible on the market, hands down. So the idea is getting people to do that quiz, which take around 15 minutes, and is going to go into production sooner than later. From there, they're going to be given a little access code. That access code will give them in to a free school community. Within that school community, there's a sort of 7 asset building thing. I should mention, as I was approaching this funnel, I was looking at enterprise design, right, which I spoke about in previous videos, specifically like how identity and experience and software experience and all of that kind of feeds on itself. Going to be looking at that. And I'm also going to be looking at the 711 4 rule, which is like a good old token from Google, which I'll just kind of walk you through it here. So I think it's a rule. There it is. First link. So shout out to Kazem Aslam from Google, essentially suggesting that before any consumer buys anything that you're possibly offering, they need 7 hours of engagement across 11 touch points in 4 separate locations. So how does that kind of all come to live? This funnel, essentially this point here, leading into the school community, is kind of like the top of funnel. So anything I do new venture-wise, it's going to lead people to kind of join this place where they have to take a quiz to join. and kind of share their problems. So I can, direct them towards solutions. We're gonna have 7 general assets kind of feeding into that, as well as 2 weekly calls, right? Um, that way I'm building live. It's the same way I do anyways with recording. Gonna double that as well for YouTube. And then also Q&A kind of style, kind of fostering that. Which I'm really excited to do, truly. From there too, there's a few different places. I don't know if I'm going to extrapolate this specifically within my, because there's a question of like, do I want to foster people building AI and automation agencies, which is, that's a whole market in itself, or do I just want to like provide AI and automation so you can implement it in your life for like nutrition and stuff like that. So I don't know, ROI is necessarily the best term in this essence, I guess, but it's more so just showcasing, good. Incentivizing through credits and like points and badges. I used to, funny enough, this is some deep lore. Back in 2013, 2014, on the outskirts of the internet, I was on some indie game forum and I used to like run these like contests, right? I would do that during school for whatever reason as a young buck. And I guess now put those muscles to use and build some interesting mini games within the school games. That's the idea. From there, once people kind of go through this education funnel, they'll then be given access to these kind of like core packages in a sense, right? You can then upsell them to future communities, things like that. Again, very accessible in terms of the going rates. I should note in terms of this funnel for top of funnel purposes, right? For the land of people that don't know me, YouTube and YouTube Shorts is a big piece of it, right? So going forward, really meditating on like these episodic series that I've scratched a little bit. Like I've done a bit of market research, playlist stuff, which has surprisingly been fruitful. So going forward, just kind of figuring out how to hit multiple stones with the same, or multiple birds with the same stone, or just throw stones at stones. You know how it goes. The idea is to bring people into the top of funnel so I can then kind of build this email list, doing it through freebies, shorts, that kind of stuff, discoverability, really driving new top of line. So with that all being said, let's get to the juice. So what I went ahead and did is there's a typo here, but I went ahead, I corrected it below. I essentially found a template on bolt.new that I like. Open it here. I saw this one and I was like, this format ain't so bad. So it's kind of like a little hobbyist project. What if, if I start a YouTube channel? I realize I have to log in again. So hold up. I was logged in previously. I lost my lost my token. So let me just jump right back in there. And I'll kind of show you. So my idea here with this template, I'm going to see how much of it I can kind of replicate with chaining prompts to bolt.new. Troubleshooting it can feel like a journey. I'll use the same top prompt when I was testing earlier today. So yeah, it kind of shows you like these little hypotheticals. So having something that kind of looks like this is always cool. I don't know if I can replicate this full kind of UI, but I'm interested to try. So with that being said, let's put the magic to use. So I'm over here in Bolt. Got the pro plan, I'll say, with that free coupon. It's unfortunately no longer available, but once I do have one, I'm happy to share it. Went ahead, fed it the demo, everything about the developer, essentially for how they built it, and explained I want to build an onboarding quiz funnel, incorporating everything below. The only 2 frameworks, and again, if you're in marketing, you have a dozen of these in your back pocket, but the only 2 frameworks I fed was the enterprise design piece, talking about identity, architecture, and experience, and then Google's 4.11.7, 4 channels, 11 touch points, and 7 hours of engagement. So with that in token, of course, all the context driving that. So from this point on, this typically took around like 10 to 15 minutes. I was just kind of course correcting as I was going. Nothing too special here, just letting it kind of run. So after this, made some coffee, came back, and here's what we got. So now that I went ahead and cooked up all that, it pretty much showed the process of the browser agent iterating on itself, correcting itself, making sure it's following good frameworks as it's developing it. And there we go. Cooked up a prompt chain. So we're going to go ahead and see if this works. So let's give it a shot. Throw this aside. Let's go. So let me close some of my dozen tabs. Get this rolling well. Okay. So here's the nature. So some people would call this kind of vibe coding. So keep in mind, language models, they love to hallucinate. So we're going to go ahead and just run with this. I'm going to go ahead and fast track. I will note these things do take their time. So there we go. 5 seconds. Nice. Outlines everything it's going to do. And it's going ahead and doing that. So as you can tell, this went on for another 10 to 15 minutes, despite me, having my caffeine ready with the adrenaline pumping. And I was itchy, just waiting to see what's happening here. So as it was kind of giving me responses, I was feeding back the same prompt chain and kind of walking through it. So yeah, you'll see it in action here. So this actually links to it. This does not. There we go. Okay. So I'm not the biggest fan of this. I'm going to do some adjustments, but I'm not going to do it just yet. I'm kind of go through this full process with the prompt chain and let this kind of follow through. So what exactly is happening here? I figured I might as well talk through it. It's pretty much building a JavaScript, which is kind of like an interactive React framework, essentially, for the web page, building on the back end of TypeScript and Tailwind. When I say back end, I mean it very loosely in the sense that's not actual back end development. For those unfamiliar with software architecture, we got a good little front end, right, which is the actual visuals, how things look. That's more of the JavaScript side. Before I continue that, notice some things are happening here. So, okay, it's looking like it needs access to Supabase in the top right. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. Just give me a moment. Okay, so fast forward a little bit. I went ahead and tried to implement the Supabase side. And then it told me the Next.js is not supported for Supabase. So Next.js, like I mentioned, is a JavaScript framework. I'm imagining this has to do just with like capabilities. So relying on an SQL-Lite database is much smaller or simpler, I'd imagine. So we'll see how it kind of works with it temporarily. Looks like it's been refactored, meaning it's been readjusted. They got rid of the dependencies for Supabase. Yeah, so it exists nice and local. Quiz is now ready to use. Let's bring in the second step. So just to kind of finish what was happening here, oh look, we got a preview. Make this more accessible. So basically building the front end with TypeScript and Tailwind CSS. Tailwind is kind of like a coloring or formatting style per se. TypeScript is just the actual language itself, building on itself. That makes sense. Frame that in better words. It's how the formatting and words all kind of stack on top of each other. This is nice. I mean, colors are god ugly. Copy, could always use the adjustments, but that is a-okay. So now let's actually build this multi-step. I'm going to go ahead and throw this in. Don't see any mention of Supabase. So let's just see how this works. Here's one piece with the prompt chains. I will note you will want to kind of, if you're more experienced on the development side of things, adjust in the way that you see reasonable, right? All language models hallucinate. The only caveat with this agent piece reinforcing itself gives you a bit more accuracy, but doesn't mean it's foolproof. The second piece we're doing here is actually building out the quiz itself, getting these kind of stages, and then each stage being 2 questions, specifically getting an understanding of their identity and their purpose, and also getting an understanding of their tech stack, what they're doing with it, and a good token of what they would like experience-wise joining this, and getting an idea of where they're at, right? This helps me kind of tailor the most effective package, right? Offering people things that are actually useful to them is the best approach. Yeah, a large part of it is dependent on like, where do you land amongst your needs based on the resources that you have access to. So with that, I'm going to let that kind of cook for a little bit. If the mouse can cooperate, there we go. After that, I'm going to handle the actual scoring logic and actually have it direct effectively. I am going to do, in the meantime, while it's running this, just get this kind of cooked up, because while I do have multiple links, I think it's really important to build one specifically for this, because I want people to test it. And when they test it, I get to learn a lot. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to embed this link in here, which I actually already have tucked away. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just replace that. I do. So I'll keep that as a reminder. So I'll show this. There we go. All right. So we went ahead, actually built something here. Assessment starts down here. So this actually links to it. This does not. There we go. Okay. So I'm not the biggest fan of this. I'm going to do some adjustments, but I'm not going to do it just yet. I'm kind of go through this full process with the prompt chain and let this kind of follow through, if that makes sense. So we're going to go here. Let's just go ahead and replace this link. Okay. So from here, this is store the data in the SQL Lite database. Any other mentions of Supabase we'll get rid of. It's important to read your stuff. It's not the cleanest, but it will do. We'll see what it does here. I am going to want to like link it to some real analytics, which is what it's looking like I'll be doing here. I will say this next step with the administrative piece, don't necessarily know if we're going to have that capability. So I imagine this will return an error, but that's okay, because there's probably other ways of going about this. So I have a choice here of actually killing the agent and then going ahead and figuring out how to optimize it. If I don't need consistent reinforcement beyond this point, being that it constantly improves itself, I would advise doing that. If you do need to dive a bit deeper, there is a study and learn, which is a bit more of an interactive back and forth. And there's also a research mode. If you have any search things, it's important to kind of like use your, the limited prompts that you have in order to achieve something, right? So this is just to show you bare bones. This actually works. Ooh, it's editing now, so I won't be able to do that. So from there, API has been updated. API being the actual backend log and results. Scoring system's all intact now. I'm going to go ahead and skip this for right now, but I am going to do this just because I have a good feeling it needed that. So yeah, let me just go through here. Ta-da-da. Make sure I have keys to everything. And yeah, let's just see how this goes. There's a large part of it too with Tailwind. I will say most app builders kind of follow it. So you'll probably see a lot of websites that have a bit of this kind of feel to it. Header, paragraph, rainbow color for whatever reason. It's very GPT-esque, if you can imagine. So being able to actually, probably should stop doing this in the middle while it's running, but the ability to actually then say, hey, this header I want to change, hey, this thing I want to change, is really a polish. And that's a good way to approach it. When you're building a website, you're looking at infrastructure and how these things build on each other. A lot of landing pages function like business cards at the end of the day, right? So here we go. Got this thing here. I should also mention, if you wanted to change specific things, there's an inspector mode. Yeah. So you could typically do this with any platform, bolt.new. Like I mentioned, just had the coupon for it. So if you look for it as well, just bolt.new pro coupon, you'll probably find something. They often give it out at random points throughout the year in support of students and the curious. So from there, let's just show you this last styling animation piece. And yeah, you'll get a good feel for this. So fear not. I realized as I'm looking at the camera now, this gets blocked off. So I'll just show you. There's a begin assessment. I kept clicking in the corner. So yeah, there we go. Failed to comply. Oop, took a moment. Corrected itself. There's the magic. Trust the language models sometimes. Yeah. This is what I'm really excited to do as well as this is running. With the information economy piece, I was looking at it. I'm like, how do I contribute to this space and still be authentic and not overtly concerned with things that don't propel it? I know there's so much I can do in terms of improvements, thumbnails, packaging, hooks, all that stuff. And the onus falls on me to actually handle that packaging better. The other onus is also building in public and just building, period. So that's what I'm putting as priority number one, but it's, in my book, not good enough. Here's the magic. So enhanced UX, enhanced animations, SEO as well for the search engine. It's good. This open graph piece we'll talk about later on. Building your full, profile, your Google graph, they'd call it. Yeah. So with that in token, let's see what we get. So go ahead, refresh this page. The window page, not the actual tab. There we go. Okay, this is interesting. Colors are not at all synchronous, but we're going to go ahead and see what happened to the quiz. Enterprise grade visual design? I don't think so. This looks like it was made by somebody who's hasn't seen many of these. I like the idea of the kind of blend here, but I'm going to go and find different colors. Even this night mode toggle, oh, that's so much cleaner. Because, yeah, if you're going to do dark mode and then like half of it dark, it's really not it. Anyways, for sake of purposes, I'll take you guys through this. So fill this all out. Interesting. I feel like there's better ways to build this. So I'm going to go with the language model one by one on each of these slides and kind of map through it, but just to show you the effectiveness and how these things go. Yeah, like this is a terrible question. If magic solved that, like I'm talking to Merlin. Anyways, so just see what happens here. If I go here, I don't know. Merlin, tell me. So result wise, doing its best to parse whatever I click through. It's supposed to actually offer me a package. Now, I don't know if I fed it the packages necessarily, so it's going to come up with some next jazz. But that's the magic. So failed to submit quiz. Yeah, so it's got some troubleshooting. That's a quick example. I got this far with the prompt chain. You can get much further if you outline even further. So keep in mind, yeah, that reinforcement layer is really impactful, and it continues to propel. So it's also important, what I will be doing, you'll see it in the next video, is actually outlining this quiz on a whiteboard. So as I go forward, I don't lose it within the documentation and the threads and all that fun stuff. So stay tuned. We'll see you guys in the next one.